Okay, well, we're here in Strabane and overlooking the town, but on the other side of the river, the rivers, I should say, is Croghan Hill. And I think it's a really important piece of archaeology, mythology, history. I'll come to all of that, but its significance has largely been lost, that people don't really know about it. But a few years ago I started kind of researching it, and I really think now it's a very important place, and therefore I've given it the name Tara, the Tara of East Donegal and West Tyrone, because its significance does actually cross the river into County Tyrone. In a sense, you know, for the purpose of what I'm going to be talking about, we have to ignore all the boundaries, the modern political boundaries, the county boundaries and so on, because they didn't apply in the 6th and 7th century. So Croghan Hill, it's a very prominent hill on the landscape, but it's not extraordinarily prominent. It's not like Lifford Mountain or anything like that. But it has a number of names. Its simple name is Croghan, but it has a number of names in Irish, and it was known as various names down the years. Croghan Hill, I'll talk about that. Croghan Drumaleen, Croghan Lifford, and it also was called Cnochbogan, and I'll talk about those later on. Now, we don't know the origins of the word, but I counted this morning in some of the sort of directories, if you like, of the old texts. I came across about 45 different Croghans or Croghans around Ireland. Now, some of them might be duplicates of each other, but anyway, just to give you the sense that there are lots of others. And possibly, but we're not certain, the root of the word may be from an Old Irish word, cru or cruor, meaning the blood from a wound. Croghan Hills are, throughout the whole island of Ireland, are always associated with ritual activity of some kind or another. But the suggestion is that it might have something to do, and I mean, the mind boggles as to what that would have meant. If that's the true root of the word, it might imply originally some kind of a sacrifice or whatever the case may be. But that's lost anyway. But there are lots of Croghans in different parts. Two that I've kind of just mentioned here, a place called Croghan Hill in County Offaly, and it's famous because one of these bog bodies was found. In fact, only half the body, the torso, without the head and without the legs. But otherwise, in fact, the body is remarkably well preserved. It's on display in the National Museum in Dublin and known as Old Croghan Man. And then the more famous Croghan is Rathcroghan in County Roscommon, which is a vast landscape of archaeological monuments and mythology and so on and so forth. And some people might know it because it's the last destination of the famous myths and legends associated with the Táin Coolina, the cattle raid of Cooley, and it's the home of King Ailill and Queen Maeve. But when you go there now, there's lots and lots of monuments. So anyway, the point I'm really trying to make is that there are lots of Croghans across Ireland, and almost all of them have ritual significance that we know about. Now, just to say, I'll be talking mainly about the historic period, which begins here about the 6th century. And during that period, if you like, the Ulster, you know, you kind of divide it into three parts. There's, you know, West Ulster, which is Donegal and the kingdoms of Donegal. Then the whole centre of Ulster, which includes County Tyrone and Strabane, where we are now, which was known as the Ardeala, the kingdoms of the Ardeala. They weren't important kingdoms, they were minor kingdoms. And then East Ulster, Counties Antrim and Down, which was the home of the people that give their name to Ulster, the Uli. But originally, this word Uli, but originally the Uli were told inhabited the whole of Ulster, from the river Drowse, which is the southern border of Donegal, down to the river Boyne. Everything north of that was the home of the people called the Uli, and they give their name to Ulster. And that's just a detailed map. I won't go into that's showing Ulster, when we first have information about the political makeup of the different little kingdoms. You can see there are lots and lots and lots of little kingdoms, but I won't go into that now. And that's a more simple map which simplifies West Ulster, the Donegal kingdoms, and then these people called the Ardíola, which are more or less in where we are now in East Ulster. And that's again a simple map of that. Now, in this part of Ulster, West Ulster, Donegal, and the kingdoms around it, probably the most prominent monument people know about is the Croghan Hill on top of the hill there. And you know, everyone thinks that that's the most important monument and archaeological place in, if you like, in Donegal or Western Ulster. But in my own opinion, just to say there are, just go back to that, I was saying, there's the central cashel and then a series of enclosures around it. The scale there is 100 metres, so you can see that they're quite big, and there are various other things there as well. But anyway, the point is that people think that this is really important. It is very important, but in my opinion, it's not the most important. Just on this map, here, the green is just about there, and you can see there's a ridge running across there. Derry is one end, the Greenland is the other. And that's a really important ridge in the archaeology. And at the centre point of that ridge, there's this hill here called Holywell Hill in English, but in Irish it's called Croghan Hill. And that's an RTE television mast. And the border between Derry and Donegal, the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom, and more lately, between the European Union and the United Kingdom, goes right through a prehistoric mound just at the bottom of that television map. Anyway, the point is that this is all very significant archaeology. But having said all of that, I still think that Croghan Hill, overlooking the town of Lifford and Strabane, is a much more important place. And it's the fact that it's a hill, it's actually a ridge, it's quite long, about 3 miles long, 1.5 miles wide, as is, by the way, the hill of Tyr in County Meath. And it's juxtaposition, this is the River Finn going along there, but also the River Mourne here in Strabane. Now, I lost one slide, here we are. Now, Croghan, why is Croghan important? Well, it's important for all these rivers. Its geographical position with the rivers and so on. Archaeologically important because the whole area is covered in archaeological sites. It's mythologically important because there are lots of stories about it. It's historically important because one of the most important kingdoms was centred there in the early medieval period. And also in folklore, it's known as an Áit Uasal, which means a kind of a special place, if you like, in some words. So anyway, the point I'm making is that there are layers and layers of importance to this site. Now, the historical point. It was the caput, by which I mean the capital, if you like, of these people, the Cenél Conaill. And they were both a dynasty and a kingdom. And they are the people who give their name to Tír Chonaill, the Irish name for Donegal. And their border, when we first know about them in the 6th century, their border was this tiny little stream that runs into the Foyle. The Foyle is just down there in the lowlands. And this is a tiny little stream called the Swilly Burn. But that stream, small and all as it is I'm not getting this, what would I say? Sorry, excuse me. That stream has been a boundary marker. This is the stream here. But these are also this is also the border of the diocese of Derry and the diocese of Raphoe, in both the Church of Ireland and the Catholic Church. This is the same stream here. It was the boundary between two, as the word has a precinct at the time of the plantations. And it goes on and on and on. Anyway, the point is that little stream, it's nothing now. You could literally jump across it. But it has been an important boundary marker, or the border between kingdoms, as far back as the 6th century. And that was the northern the northern boundary of the kingdom of Cenél Conaill. Now, this map shows Croghan Hill here, and these arrows are how the kingdom spread out from there and conquered different parts of Donegal. And you can see on this map there are dates, and those dates are the dates of battles where they, if you like, conquered that particular battle. Especially down here in South Donegal, you can see there's a whole cluster of battles as they fought a battle, won it, moved on, fought a battle, so on and so forth. Anyway, that's just by the way. Now, at the time when we first know about these people, this is a political map of Donegal. Now, I've marked some of the Tyrone's places, like the kingdom of Eoghain Ard Straw, which Strabane was probably itself on the border between two kingdoms, the Eoghain Ard Straw and another kingdom here called the Eoghain of Loch Foyle. But anyway, the colour indicates the maps of the politics of Donegal. And the really important one is the yellow. Croghan Hill is in the yellow on that map, and they're the people called the Cenél Conaill. And just watch, the date of that is about 550. So there it is, hopefully about 600. It has expanded. There it is about 725. It's expanded again. And there it is about 800. It has totally collapsed. And in the meantime, the people of Eoghain have spread over into County Derry and into County Tyrone. And of course, that's how the name Tyrone, how it gets its name. So now, as I said, really, I mean, I'm talking about history and archaeology, but really, what's really important about this area is its geography. And this is the River Mourne going down to the town of Strabane, where it joins the River Finn and then becomes the Foyle. And that junction where the three rivers meet, the Mourne, the Finn and the Foyle, that's a really important junction in ancient times. Its name in Irish was called Portna Trí Náwad. That's the junction. And it meant the junction, I suppose, of the three enemies, Portna Trí Náwad. And the three enemies were the rivers, because if the Finn and the Mourne are in flood state, and the Foyle is tidal, and the rivers literally fight each other at that point. So they were the three enemies. Now, before I move on, I wanted to point out, down here, there's a little town called Cooley Slin, just down here. And I should have pointed out before we left that there's a very significant bend on the River Finn here. This is Croghan Hill, and the river has to, as it were, bend to go around the southern end of the hill. So that geography is really significant. But Cooley Slin, the little townland, was the site of a famous battle in the year 600, in which the king of Cenél Eoghain, that's the people of Inishowen, was victor and so on. Now, that was the first of a series of battles which continue on through the 7th century and the 8th century and culminate in the year 789. And these are battles between what I might call the people of Donegal, the Cenél Conaill, and the people of Inishowen, the Cenél Eoghain, and their enemies, and they fight all these various battles, 727, 32, 33, so on and so forth. Finally, in 789, they win. And it's at that point that these people of Cenél Eoghain come down into what is now Tyrone and gives Tyrone its name. Now, as I said, the geography of all this is really important. And here you have the rivers, the two rivers, well, the Mourne and the Finn coming together, running out into the Foyle, and there's Croghan Hill. And that's really significant. Now, one of the earliest references we have to this area is in the lives of saints, and particularly of St. Patrick. There are a number of references. In what we call the Tripartite Life of Patrick, which was written in the early 9th century, so about the year 820 or thereabouts, it talks about Patrick he afterwards went into the country of Eoghain, Tír Eoghain, son of Neil, over the Barnes of Tireda, that's Barnesmore, into Monnihe, and remember that's important, and to Donach Mór Muiganihe, and he founded a church there and so on and so forth. And that church is still there. We'll see that in a moment. And this is an earlier version of the same thing. I won't go into the whole detail of it, but this is an account by a man called Tír Eoghain, written about the year 690. And it's an account of a journey that St. Patrick makes up through Donegal and eventually into Derry and Tyrone. And it starts off, so we're starting off with this coming into Donegal. He crosses the river Drowse, which is the southern border of Donegal, and he comes on, and I just skipped most of that to get to down here to the bottom. This is all details of southern Donegal, and he proceeded over the gap of the sons of Conaill, that's the Barnesmore gap, to Monnihe, and he founded there a great church. And then he goes on up to Carndonagh and Inishowen. Anyway, the point is that these are the earliest references we have to the geography of this part of the world, which is an account of the travels of St. Patrick. This is the River Drowse, the southern border of Donegal. And the main road, if you're travelling now up through Donegal, the main road, that road, which crosses, if you like, at Ballyshannon and continues all up through Donegal as far as Lifford on the other side of the bridge here from Strabane, that road is 2,000 years old if it's a day. People giving out about the potholes would probably accept that. But anyway, if you follow the road up, there is the Barnesmore Gap. And then on the other side of the road, we've come through the gap, and here's the same road. And by the way, this was a very, if you like, danger point, so people had to monitor. And up on the hillside, just up there off the picture, there is a huge enclosure. So that's about 80 metres across. It's a big circular, marvellous monument. Unfortunately, it's literally in the middle of a bog, and it's very hard to access. But it was, if you like, a barracks, a military barracks from the Iron Age to defend the gap. Anyway, the road continues on up towards Croghan, and this is Croghan Hill here. Now, we mentioned earlier that St. Patrick founded a church which was called Donach Mór Muiganihe, and this is it as it is now. It's the Church of Ireland Church of Donach Mór. And of course, it's a relatively modern 18th, 19th century church now, but the site is one of the earliest places in the northwest of Ireland that we have specific archaeological reference to, and one of the earliest Christian centres. And it's very likely that people like, for instance, Columba, that may be been one of the first places they ever encountered the Christian religion. But all along the road, that road that I've been talking to you about, there are a series of other churches, like Donach Mór Muiganihe. This is another one. This is called, has a number of names, but in Irish it was called Táithneach Chumarcha. And the people who looked after it were the Bogans, the O'Bogans. And I don't remember the Croghan Hill, one of the names I said, it was called Crochbogan. So Croghan Hill is just up here. So there are a number of these churches, and this is further on a little bit. This is Clonlea, just to the north of Lifford, so literally just across the river from Strabane. Now, that's kind of, if you like, in a nutshell, the historical thing, but I'll come back to that. In archaeological terms, the site is really important for all sorts of reasons, but on the top of the hill, you can see this little bump or cairn or even nipple. In fact, very often they're called nipples, the name. But this is a mound on the top of the hill, and it's, here it is, here, this is drawing, but it's inside the circular or subcircular enclosure. And almost certainly that is a passage tomb from the Neolithic. So it would have been built about 3000 BC. And so it's a kind of a mini version of Newgrange, or one of these places down in the Boyne Valley. Now, passage tombs are almost always occur in clusters and what we call cemeteries. And this is just a plan of the cemetery, the passage tomb cemetery there. So there's Croghon Hill with the mound on the top. And then below it, there are all these sites here. There may have been others, but they've been destroyed. And in fact, almost all of these were destroyed. But through archaeological detective work, we can kind of put them back together again. And not very far away then, there's sites like this, the Beltry Stone Circle, which is a major archaeological site. So the point I'm trying to make is that the area is crammed with archaeology. Now, so this is a plan. This is the River Finn here. There's the Mourne, so Strabane is here. And there's Croghan Hill as well. And all of the dots on this map all represent important archaeological sites. There's Cooley Slin, I mentioned earlier, where the battle in the year 600. Now, I'll come back to Cooley Slin because not only had it this historical battle, but there's also a big mythological battle that takes place there as well. But all of these sites on the river here, are all major archaeological sites. And so the Foyle comes up, joins the Finn, or the Finn and the Mourne join together to become the Foyle here at this place, Portland Tree Nawat. The Foyle is tidal, and the tide continues right up as far as this place here, Ballylast. There's Donachmore Miganeha, there's Chapna Cormaca there's Clonley. So the point is that there's a roadway, the modern road follows the river, but that modern road is itself 2,000 years old. And all along it there are these, dotted along these churches that were like railway stations in a kind of spiritual sense. Anyway, this is, in fact it's an old map, but it's a map of the archaeological sites of Donegal, and this is the River Finn here. So just to see the clustering of all these sites. In fact, you could add lots more to it, but it'll just do for the purposes of the exercise. Now, as I say, the site is also really important for geographical reasons. And this is the River Finn, there's the River Mourne, so they join together here. The county boundary obscures that to form the Foyle running out into the ocean. The point is that from the ocean, if you're a ship on the ocean, and you want to go up, kind of like going up the Nile or up the Amazon, you know. You have to remember, in Stone Age times, there's no roads, there's nothing. So the only way people can travel is on the rivers, and the river is tidal all the way up to here. And that's about 50 kilometers in. So, and as late as the 1600s, when Dockwra comes to, if you like, conquer this whole area for England, that's the way he travels. He travels up into the interior of Ulster. And, you know, if you imagine, that gets you really right into the heart of Ulster by travelling up these rivers. Now, on the River Finn, there is a very important bend. And somebody might know that in County Meath, there's the famous Bend of the Boyne, where there's a lot of archaeological monuments. So this bend here on the River Finn, the word in Irish is lube or loop. And there's just beside the bend, there's a place called Donegal, where there's a Catholic church on a hill there. And almost certainly that Catholic church was built on the Donegal, the fort of the bend. And the river has to bend because up here, the hill rises, Croghan Hill. So the hill, Croghan Hill, forces the river to go around it. And it's of immense archaeological importance. Now, just go back to the junction with this is the Mourne here, this is the Finn here, and this is the Foyle. So this is where the three rivers join. And there's the town of Strabane there. And this is the port, na Trí Nawat, the junction, the meeting place of the three enemies. And the three enemies are the rivers. And I meant to say that just this part here of what's in County Tyrone, on the Tyrone side, is known as Castletown, I think. And almost certainly it was the location of a castle of the O'Donnells, which the O'Donnells built to push into modern Tyrone. And one of their leaders, a man called Manus O'Donnell, wrote a famous book, The Life of Columba. This is the front page. And almost certainly that's where he wrote it. Now, people will, I'll be held up for heresy because people like to think it was made in Strabane. Of course, it's only 100 yards in the difference, but in my opinion, it was made on the Tyrone side rather than the Donegal side. Anyway, in the 1830s, the Ordnance Survey, when they were surveying all this, realised that the river, the Foyle, was navigable by boats of between 60 to 80 tons as far as Ballylast, that place I mentioned earlier, which is 50 kilometres in from the ocean. So this really is important. And there's the Foyle and all these other sites, and there's Ballylast on the river. So, you know, all the way in from 50 kilometres in from the ocean, it was navigable for ships and boats. This is just a kind of something I showed earlier in the fence. These dots, all these dots on this map are ring forts. So remember, we're talking about here, this area. And you can see all these dots are all ring forts. So in other words, that area was intensively settled in early times. Of course, the reason for it is that the land is extremely good. And this is a soils map of Ireland. But if you just, you know, if you look here, there's the junction of the three rivers. And the land on either side of the rivers is good land, and we know that. And it still is good land, but it's always been good land. And one of the reasons it's always been good land is because, and this is Lieutenant Wilkinson of the Ordnance Survey, I should have put the date on, but it's about 1830. And he says, at the new moon, full spring tides cause the river to rise more than 12 feet, and the whole valley of the Finn becomes one sheet of water. I'm sure modern farmers still floods, but modern farmers don't like it. But the reason those modern farmers are there is because when the river flooded, and it flooded for thousands of years, the mud deposit left by the subsiding of these floods is of the most fertilizing kind, and that's what causes the land to be good. And if you remember, the civilization of Egypt were all based on the flooding of the Nile. And the Finn is, if you like, a mini version of the Nile here. That's causing us the very good land. So this is from Croghan Hill, looking down to the river Finn when it's in flood and away into County Tyrone. Now, the modern counties and indeed the border separates these lands, but in ancient times this was all just part of one kingdom, one geographical and political entity. Now, the name of the river Finn, that's the Finn in flood. So the name of the Finn itself is very interesting because it's usually translated as things like white, silver, those kinds of, but it can also mean words like pure, true, sincere, even blessed or sacred in some way. And a related word in Irish is fionachtan, which means finding, discovering, recognizing, experiencing. So there's something kind of magical about it. And it's related also to the word fis in Irish, which means wisdom, intelligence, information, all those kinds of things. So the River Finn is kind of a manifestation of wisdom and discovery and all those white, bright, pure, all the best things Finn means. And this is all summed up in a story told about Fionn McCool. I won't go into the main story, but some of you might remember it. Fionn McCool is told as a young boy to watch a salmon that's roasting on a fire. But the salmon is the salmon of knowledge. And he's told he must not eat it, he must just watch it while it's being roasted. But he goes to move it and he burns his finger and he puts his thumb in his mouth. And of course, that means he's eaten a part of the salmon, so he becomes wise. So Finn's wisdom is related to the name of the river Finn and to all these other concepts of discovery, wisdom, so on and so forth. So the Finn is a kind of a, in that sense, is a kind of a magical. Now, the name, the Mourne is also, has also a kind of mythological meaning, but I won't go into that now, if you like. Okay, so this is back to Croghan Hill. So you've got this very important geographical place, the hill overlooking this navigable river, a river that's a kind of magical or mythological in some ways and related to things like wisdom and truth and all those kinds of things. And also you've got lots of mythological stories about the hill. So the hill overlooks, do you remember when I had that slide of looking into County Tyrone? The name of that territory in Old Irish was Monnihe, this word Monnihe, but it was formerly called Mabulloch. But anyway, there are a number of stories about this. And one of them is a story about a man called Brogan, who was in Spain, and he founds a city called Brigancia, which is possibly to be identified with La Corona in northern Spain now. And in La Corona, he built a great tower. And there's the tower. It's actually, that is actually a Roman lighthouse, a lighthouse which has been dolled up over the years. But in origin, it's a lighthouse from the Roman period. And if you like, myths have. Anyway, Brogan builds this tower in the story, and from the top of it, he's able to see all across the sea to Ireland. And his son set out for Ireland. This land, sorry, just go back a sec. So his son called sets out from the tower to cross the sea to Ireland, arrives in Ireland, and when he arrives in Ireland, he's greatly praising of Ireland. Ireland's a beautiful country, lots of fertile land, etc., etc. But the natives, anyway, when they hear him praise their land, they're afraid he's going to steal it from them. So they overtake him and they kill him over there at Monnihe. And in some versions of the story, the mound at the top of Croghan Hill is his burial place. Where he's buried. So, anyway, this is a poem, a long poem in Irish, written about 1100, what we call Denshanacha's poem, which is just the same story but set out in verse form. So what I'm really trying to convey to you is that there's lots of information about this. Anyway, there are other stories which we're getting closer to kind of history, in the sense that Donegal is named after this man, Conaill Gulban. Tyrone and Inishowen are named after this man, Owen. And these are the sons, according to tradition, of a man called Niall of the Nine Hostnail Gilla. These two sons and a daughter, Luchra, are born at a place called Drumleen, which is just, again, a little bit up further from the bridge between Lifford and Strabane. And Croghan Hill is sometimes called Croghan Drumleen. So Drumleen is a very important place where all these important people are supposed to be born. That's the kind of the essence of it. And Conaill Gulban, who gives his name to Donegal, has a number of names. He's called Conaill Gulban Gortna Fivena. And Conaill Gulban is the name of Ben Gulban or Ben Bulban, the mountain in Sligo, and Ben Fivena is the name of Benevolent Mountain in County Derry. So both of them are kind of peculiar flat-topped mountains, and so which are, if you like, neither of them is actually in Donegal, but they can be seen from Donegal. Yeah. So they form the southern and the northern boundaries, and they are part of the name of this mythical hero called Conaill Gulban, who gives his name. Where he's born, Drumleen, and has all this mythical association, but it also has a number of archaeological importance. So, including the discovery of these stone heads. They're quite rare in Ireland. If you found those in France in the Iron Age, you'd be very happy with them. They're part of Celtic tradition, but they're rare in Ireland. But there's a concentration of them in this area around Drumleen. That's another one there. Now, again, the detail of this doesn't really matter too much, because what I'm really trying to convey to you is that there's these layers of stories about the place. Another story is about those 4 brothers, or the brothers I was talking about. They are born in Drumleen, up here across the river, but their father is king in Tara in County Meath. But when they're old enough, they decide to come back to Donegal to conquer Donegal. And this map is a kind of a map of the fictional account of their conquest of Donegal. So they come up here and they fight all battles at all these places. I won't go into all of them. But anyway, their final battle is at Croghan Hill. And at the bottom, I should say, of Croghan Hill. And when the battle is over, they climb to the top of that hill. And then Conaill, he's not the oldest of them, but he's reckoned as being the most important in the story anyway. He divides up Donegal amongst all the brothers. And he sets up, if you like, the kingdoms of Donegal. So once again, so Croghan is, here's the River Finn, there's the bend, so Croghan is there. So after the battle, they climb to the top, and your man carves up Donegal, and as it were, hands it out to the other brothers. Now, it's a fiction, of course, but it's a fiction that seeks to explain how the different areas of Donegal came to exist. Now, because we're in Tyrone, I have to keep mentioning Tyrone. To the south of this area, there's a kingdom called the Tír of Straw, and unfortunately I didn't put it on it. Imachar and Lochfoyle are here, but they are minor kingdoms. They're never important. These kingdoms, particularly these ones here, are going to be the bee's knees, but the kingdoms in what is now Derry and Tyrone are minor kingdoms. Now this is another piece of mythology. Do you remember earlier I talked about a battle, a real historical battle in the year 600 in a place called Cooley-Slin? Well, there is a mythical battle also takes place there, and according to the text, this is the first battle in Ireland actually. And the story is a man called Partholon. By the way, I should say that these stories are a kind of a mixture of ancient Irish mythology and stories from the Bible, and they get, the Old Testament and all, it's all mixed up. But anyway, this guy Partholon, he's the first person, according to the stories, to land in Ireland after Noah's flood. So the place has been under Noah's flood for whatever. Then the land dries off, and Partholon is the first man to get here. And he lands at what is now Ballyshannon, basically. And but then afterwards, within 10 years of coming to Ireland, he won a battle in Slough of Monaghan, that's Cooley-Slin. I won't go into the detail of that. The battle continued for a week. 200 men and 600 women were the number of the people who came to fight against Partholon, and they fought that same battle. It was the first battle in Ireland. So the little town of the Cooley-Slin on the other side of the River Finn, just a mile or so, a couple of miles from where we are, that was the place where it was the first battle in Ireland. And really, it's funny, but it's also important to point out that that area has continued to be a battle site all through early Irish history. One of the first skirmishes of the Siege of Derry took place at Claddy Bridge. And there was a famous battle in 789 at what's now Claddy Bridge. And indeed, even into the recent Troubles, people might remember, I certainly remember, that on one side of Claddy Bridge, in Claddy Village, you had a British Army encampment monitoring the bridge. And on the other side of the bridge, on the Donegal side, you have the Irish Army monitoring. So it continued to be a flashpoint, literally, from mythological times, all through, if you like, Irish history right through. And this is Cooley-Slin. This is where the first battle in Ireland took place. And just to say, there behind there's Croghan Hill with its little kind of nipple at the top. For those reasons, I think Croghon Hill is a really important place, historically, mythologically, geographically, and indeed in folklore. I haven't gone into the folklore, but there is a lot of folklore as well. A man called Seanban MacMenamin, who was a Donegal writer, recorded some of this in Irish. And all of that, in the sense that history has been utterly forgotten. There are no heritage signs pointing you there or anything like that now. But this really is one of the most important places in the northwest of Ireland, by which I include County Donegal and the western side of County Tyrone. And if you really want to know more about it, then you have to read my book. I'll finish there.